All right, welcome aspirants. India has this huge, bold vision, right? To become a $30 trillion economy. But, a vision that's just the start. It's not a guarantee. So today, we're going to break down the two completely different paths that could lie ahead for India. And more importantly, the three critical pillars that will decide which path we actually take. Think of this as the ultimate blueprint you'll need for your exam prep.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll kick things off with the big dream itself, that 30 trillion goal. Then, we'll get real about the growth rate challenge that's standing in the way. After that, we'll dive deep into the three pillars for success. That's investment, exports, and decentralization. And of course, we'll wrap it all up with the key takeaways you'll definitely want for your exams.
All right, first things first, let's really set the stage. Union Minister Piyush Goyal has put this massive target out there, India becoming a $30 trillion economy. But what does a number that huge actually mean? And how do we even begin to measure something like that?
So yeah, this is the central question, isn't it? Can we really do it? And to even start answering that, we have to define exactly how we measure the size of an economy. Honestly, this is the bedrock of this entire conversation.
Now, for your exams, this is the one term you've got to know inside and out, GDP, or Gross Domestic Product. It's basically the total value of everything, all the goods, all the services, produced inside a country in 1 year. The cricket analogy is perfect, right? Think of it as the total runs a team scores in a full year. And the specific metric we're talking about here, the one that really matters for these big international comparisons, is nominal GDP.
Okay, so we have the goal, but hitting it, that's not a given, not by a long shot. It all comes down to our growth momentum. And when you look at the data, it actually reveals two very, very different potential futures for India. Let's take a look. So what the analysis does is it presents two possible paths forward, both based on how we've performed in the past. And you'll notice there are two crucial variables at play here. First, how fast our GDP grows in rupee terms, and second, how much the rupee's value changes against the US dollar. Both of these are absolutely critical for that final $30 trillion number.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Look at the hard numbers. If India keeps up the pace it's set over the last 25 years, boom, we hit that $30 trillion mark by 2048. But, and this is a big but, if we continue at the slightly slower pace we've seen in just the last 11 years, that same target gets pushed back by 7 whole years, all the way to 2055.
And this chart, wow, it just brilliantly shows the long-term impact. We're not just talking about a 7-year delay. By the year 2055, the difference in the sheer size of the economy is massive. We're talking about an economy that could be almost 75% larger if we just match the performance of the last quarter century. That is a huge divergence.
So, what's the bottom line here? It's simple. Performance matters, a lot. Even these tiny seeming dips in the annual growth rate, when they compound over decades, they create a massive, massive gap. The takeaway is clear. India cannot afford to slow down if it wants to hit this ambitious goal on time.
Okay, so if faster growth is the answer, the big question is, how do we get it? Well, the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, S. Mahendra Dev, lays out three critical pillars. Let's start with the very first one, investment.
So this is our starting point. Right now, our investment rate, that's the chunk of our GDP being plowed back into the economy, is sitting at about 31 to 32%.
But here's the thing. To consistently hit that magic number, that 7% real GDP growth year after year, experts say we need to push this investment rate up. The target? Somewhere around 34 to 35%. That's the gap we have to close.
So why isn't the private sector investing more? I mean, they have the cash. According to Mr. Dev, when he asks them, the answer he gets is one simple word: uncertainty. Now that is a key term you should definitely use in your exam answers when you're explaining why private investment might be lagging.
So the strategy to tackle this has three main parts. First, and this is critical, we've got to encourage the private sector, which is sitting on a lot of cash, to start investing again. Second, the government needs to keep up its own spending on big projects, what we call CAPEX, because that has this amazing multiplier effect. And third, where does all this money come from? We have to finance it by increasing our own domestic savings.
All right, pillar number 2. Let's shift gears and look at the role of what we sell to the rest of the world and what we make right here at home. This is the second crucial piece of the puzzle for sustained growth. Now, while everyone talks about exports, and yes,
Strong export growth is vital for any emerging economy. It's so important to remember this ratio for context. The Indian economy is overwhelmingly driven by what happens at home. Domestic demand, that's you and me buying things and companies investing, makes up a huge 80% of our GDP.
Okay, now here is a really critical concept, one you absolutely need to have in your notes for your exams. It's called the missing middle. This term points to a major structural weakness in our manufacturing sector. Let me break down exactly what that means.
So the problem is this. Most of our manufacturing firms are super small, with fewer than 10 workers. And because they're so small, they just can't get the scale or efficiency they need. This is a big reason why manufacturing share of our economy has been kind of stuck. So the goal is clear. We need to nurture this middle layer of companies, getting them to a size where they can really absorb more workers and boost our overall productivity.
And that brings us to the final pillar, which focuses on a totally different kind of strategy. We're talking about empowering growth from the ground up through decentralization.
And the perfect case study here is MGNREGI, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. It really is a powerful blueprint. You see, by giving the power of implementation to the local panchayats, the scheme didn't just create jobs. It set off this incredible cascade of benefits, both direct ones and some really powerful indirect ones, from giving workers more bargaining power to strengthening our democracy at the very grassroots level.
Okay, to help you lock these three pillars in your memory for your exams, I've got a simple mnemonic for you. Just think of IEMD. What does it stand for? India's Economic Momentum Drive. That's I for investment, EM for exports and manufacturing, and D for decentralization. IEMD. Got it?
All right, let's pull all of this together into a super high-yield summary for your notes. No fluff, no distractions, just the core facts, the key figures, and the important keywords you absolutely need to remember.
Okay, first up, the goal and the challenge. The big target, a $30 trillion economy. The metric we use, nominal GDP. Now, the two paths. Scenario 1, based on the last 25 years, gets us there by 2048. But Scenario 2, based on the more recent 11 years, pushes it to 2055. And the huge takeaway? Small differences in growth rates have absolutely massive long-term consequences.
Next, Pillar 1, investment. Remember the key numbers. We're at 32% of GDP now, but the target for 7% growth is 35%. The key drivers are private sector investment supported by government capex and higher domestic savings. And what's the main hurdle holding it back? That one word, uncertainty.
Okay, Pillar 2, exports and manufacturing. First, remember the GDP share. 80% domestic demand, 20% exports. The key piece of jargon you need to know is the missing middle, that lock of medium-sized firms. The problem is that most firms have fewer than 10 workers, and manufacturing share of GDP is stuck. The solution? We need to grow more firms that can hire more people and achieve better labor absorption.
And finally, Pillar 3, decentralization. The core idea is super simple. Give more power to panchayats and local bodies. Your go-to example here is MGNREGA. And don't just mention the jobs. Remember to talk about those powerful indirect benefits, like increased bargaining power for workers and women's empowerment. Those are the details that make for a top-tier exam answer.
So, as you think about all this, here's a final thought. The path forward requires a huge push on all these fronts, right? But which of these three pillars, boosting private investment, fixing that missing middle in manufacturing, or achieving real, true political decentralization, which one do you think is the biggest challenge for India today? That's the kind of critical thinking that will take your answers from just good to truly great.
We really hope this structured breakdown was useful for your preparation. For more deep dives on other important topics, please go ahead and explore the other explainers we have on our channel. And hey, if you found this valuable, your support in liking, sharing, and subscribing really helps us create more content just like this. All the best.